Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and today we are taking a look at the Game Balance Manifesto in Path of Exile Expedition. If you are new to the channel, then you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one. Without any further ado, I have not had a chance to read these. I just got back from a work meeting, so let's dive in. With every League release, we review and rebalance many aspects of Path of Exile to update and reinvigorate old mechanics while trimming some power from strategies that stand too far above the rest. Oh boy. This time around, our changes are far more thorough. As part of the Expedition League announcement, Chris has already talked about a number of changes, but we'll go over them again quickly here with a bit more of a discussion of their consequences and some associated changes we've made as a result. By the way, for those of you who are wanting me to do paint reviews and paint responses to all this, I'm not going to get into paint tonight. I'm going to just try to just read the manifesto and then ingest it, and we'll see about responding to it hopefully in between now and patch notes. But I'm just going to try to read this today. Okay, over time, the introduction of new mechanics, updates to existing balance, and improved collective understanding of the game has caused the damage of characters to be way too high. Okay, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Like, the PoE community should take this as a compliment. Over time, updates to existing balance and improved collective understanding of the game. Like, hey people, we've gotten to know how to play PoE and we've shared that with each other enough that GGG is now having to redesign the game because players know about how to play PoE. I'll take that as a compliment, but then does that mean that we're getting smacked for learning? I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave that to you guys to interpret. Many players are able to complete mid-difficulty boss fights in a fraction of a second without any interesting interaction. Our ability to create interesting boss fights and monster combat is removed when players are routinely killing those monsters or bosses before they have used a single ability. Okay, but maybe players play Path of Exile. This is probably going to be the summary of my comment on this stuff tonight. Maybe players play Path of Exile because the interesting interactions that we're looking for is with our characters, not with monsters. Does anybody else feel that way? I mean, drop me a comment if you agree or disagree, or if you just think I'm insane. I don't know. My brain kind of feels like the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time after my work day today. But to me, that's the best way I would say this. Like, in this paragraph, GGG says, hey, you guys are learning how to play our game, and we want you to enjoy monster boss fights in longer than a fraction of a second. Like, if you have a build that can kill a monster in a fraction of a second, that's the interesting interaction. As a player, I'm trying to build as good a character as I can. I'm not trying to build a character that can experience as much of the animations of the game as possible. Anyway, I'll leave somebody else to say that in a more articulate way than me. That's as articulate as I can get tonight. Because of this, we're significantly reducing player damage at higher levels to greatly increase the challenge of endgame content, and are raising monster life at lower levels to make the leveling experience in line with our vision of how Path of Exile should be. Many of these changes are intended to affect every character in the game in some way, but we're still going to continue our tradition of making changes to the most powerful and least powerful mechanics to improve build diversity. So many things I could say there. Information already provided in the announcement live stream has been reproduced in italics. Okay, so we're not going to read the italics part. Overall, this works out, blah, blah, blah. This achieves 2 goals for us, blah, blah, blah. Or no, wait, no, this isn't new. Relevant section from the live stream. No, it is new. Okay, it's from the live stream, not from the trailer. Okay, let's see this. For a while now, we have been concerned with the power gap between support gems. There are gems that grant huge multiplicative damage bonuses, and there are gems that do a bunch of stuff you really don't care about. When you're building a character, by far the correct choice is just to stack on all the multiplicative damage bonuses and ignore all the interesting utility support gems because their opportunity cost is just too high. But that's also because monsters are difficult and we're trying to kill them as quickly as possible. So if you want us to choose quality of life gems, I'm so confused with the direction right now. I'm so confused. I'm really trying. Okay, just keep reading, Iron. We are reducing the damage bonuses on the support gems that are clearly just all about huge damage boosts and trying to give them impactful and appropriate downsides. For example, the controlled destruction support gem now penalizes critical strikes multiplicatively. Okay, see, that's interesting. That's a part of core GGG game design philosophy, like uniques that give you a really cool, interesting interaction, also have a really cool, interesting drawback, and you've got to mitigate that. I'm in line with that. What confuses me is, hey, we want you to see all of these animations about monsters and not have interesting choices. Like, the reason why we don't have interesting choices are because your interesting choices for gems don't do the things that we need our gems to do, which is deal damage a lot of the time. Like, the game is built around a couple of different interesting interactions. Like, unless GGG's design philosophy and goal is for everybody to be playing Worm Blaster, which Worm Blaster gets nerfed whenever it goes in and does enough damage to actually kill anything. So I don't know. I want to see the characters that Grinding Gear Games wants us to build. That's what I want to see. Overall, this works out to a total of somewhere around 20%, potentially as high as 40% damage reduction for a character using a fully 6-link skill with entirely damaged support gems. There's much less impact for characters that used utility support gems or who didn't have a 6-link setup. This achieves two goals for us. Firstly, the gap between the good and bad support gems has been narrowed. Yep, by making more things bad. Creating more interesting build opportunities. All right, yeah, there we go. Secondly, as if the top tier meta stuff won't still be top tier meta stuff. Secondly, player damage output in the end game is reduced, which is a goal for this balance pass. All right, so does that mean that people aren't going to be like blowing up Maven invitations instantly for the entire league within the first week? It'll be interesting to see that. If that's the goal, they've stated that's the goal, player damage output in the end game to be reduced. But if you can instantly phase Shaper or Cirrus or Maven or whatever end game boss comes along in 5 years from now, if you can still phase them within a week during Trade League, have you met your goal? That's your stated goal. It's your stated goal. We'll see. We'll see if players, because of players' knowledge of the game, figures out a way to get around it. This whole league feels like a challenge. It feels like a bring it on. It feels like GGG's like, hey, we're going to nerf you guys because you guys are getting too good at the game. Okay? We want you to see some more animations. And now the whole player base is going to be like, all right, well, you nerfed my favorite build, so I'll figure out a different build that'll actually be better than my last favorite build anyway, thanks to new uniques and new interactions and new crafting currency. As I mentioned, we want to iteratively restore challenge to Path of Exile. It's worth clarifying that we haven't buffed unused utility support gems as part of this balance pass. We haven't buffed unused utility support gems. So we're just bringing down the damage ones. We're not bringing up the quality of life ones. It's fully intentional. It's a reduction of power for the most damaged ones. Yeah, okay, at least that's consistent. Damage multipliers between support gems have been standardized following these rules. Gems that provide a useful benefit in addition to damage usually grant less than 25% more damage at gem level 20. Those that provide only a damage bonus or have only a very mild restriction or penalty grant around 30 to 35% more damage. Those with downsides or restrictions grant 38 to 48% more damage, depending on how severe the cost of using the support is. A couple of existing supports have had a downside added. Oh, now that's interesting. See, I think design, like GGG used to say, just tweaking numbers is lazy and bad game design. I think adding interesting penalties is the way to go. Like, what is it? Is it Ruthless that like every third hit you get the big hit? Like, that's an interesting drawback because the built-in drawback is like, hey, 2 out of every 3 hits, you're not doing as much damage. But 1 out of 3 hits, you're doing this bigger damage. Like, that's an interesting thing. So you've got to weigh, okay, like, do I just build around attack speed and do as many hits as possible so that way I'm triggering that big hit as much as possible. Is that really worth it? Or do I just go with like one big really hit? Like, how do I build around that? That's not the only example that we could think of. That's the only one I can think of at the moment. But that's an interesting gem that's kind of got a built-in penalty or even a controlled destruction like what they're mentioning now. Like, hey, do I want this type of damage bonus at the risk of losing this critical damage effect? Like, how do I want to balance that out? Sometimes it's like on the passive tree balancing out elemental overload. Like, when is it worth it for your build to pick elemental overload versus just go crit? Those are really interesting like drawbacks and decisions to make. I agree with GGG with their design in that regard. Like, adding interesting downsides is cool. Just tweaking numbers, that sounds like something that Riot Games would do with League of Legends. That sounds like something Blizzard would do with WoW. It sounds like something that I don't even know who makes Raid Shadow Legends, but that's always the meme. It sounds like what other companies who aren't as cool as Grinding Gear Games and who aren't as good as developing such a great game like Path of Exile, it sounds like what they do. Whereas interesting game design choices put before us as players about the characters that we make, that's giving us items that have a bonus and a benefit, but also a drawback and a downside. That's pretty cool. Here we go. Melee physical damage now grants supported skills 10% less attack speed. Yeah, see, that's cool. So how do you mitigate that, or how do you play around that? Do you incorporate that into your build at all? Do you even care? Do you have enough attack speed that it just doesn't matter? Certain builds such as Earthquake Bleed are barely affected by this downside. Because the damage multiplier hasn't changed, the support is almost as strong as before. Minion damage causes minions from supported skills to have 25% life. So you might want to consider other supports if your minions scale damage from their life, or if they're not tough enough when supported. See, that's interesting. This change provides more choice for builds that can be supported by a variety of support gems and lessens the relative damage loss incurred by using a support gem that doesn't provide direct damage, like Chain or Ancestral Call. Okay, cool. There are now builds that will benefit more by using far more interesting support gem setups that were previously balanced around using only high damage support gems. Now, the pushback to this is, of course, going to be, well, if you nerf the numbers on damage support gems, does that just mean everybody who uses damage support gems really feels the need for the top tier of support gems? Like, is everybody going to be going for the awakened support gems now, right? Is everybody going to feel the need for that? That you absolutely have to get awakened support gems because the little bit of loss of damage that you've gotten, on your support gems now requires you to get that little bit back from early pushing and grinding even further. It'll be interesting to see. A number of projectile and bow support gems like Barrage, GMP, and Chain haven't been changed. So builds using these more interesting projectile support effects will have lost much less damage than other builds. Good, like bows need another hit. This has caused certain bow builds to be strong relative to other skills setups at late game. I would say bow builds are really strong because of how fast they are with Orobots. That's from what I watch and that's what I read. But that's just anecdotal. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. With our buffs to skills like Barrage, 15% damage increase at gem level 20. Lightning Arrow, 15% damage increase at gem level 20. Split Arrow, 10% more attack speed at all levels. Guys, we're going to level with Split Arrow. Secret League Starter build confirmed. These add up to really help bring bows up in power level relative to other builds. This might actually be a bigger benefit for bow builds than the bow build rework. What if 315 is actually a better bow league than bow league was? Oh man, that's funny. Many trap supports haven't been adjusted, so trap builds will not suffer much of a damage loss compared to using other skills at high levels. Okay, so if you want to league start trappers and miners, go for it. The trap support, cluster trap support, multiple trap support, charge trap support, advanced trap support, and swift assembly support are unchanged. This has caused traps to be stronger relative to other skill setups at late game. And they'll have more of a reason to use the special trap support gems instead of generic damage support gems. Okay, so there you go. League start traps. There are buffs to the cooldown trap skills. Lightning Spire Trap, 25% more damage at all levels. And Seismic Trap, 40% more damage at all levels, and a drastic increase in area of effect. Oh, that could be cool. We have made their wave and strike frequency now scale with trap throwing speed instead of cast speed. Yes, this does mean with the Architect's Hand or Slave Driver's Hand unique items, you get immense bonuses even if you're not a trapper. You can see how trap builds are going to be very powerful. Ooh, okay. Yeah, this is Bow and Trap League. There you go. At least for League starters. Certain builds that were balanced around having very powerful support gems have lost more damage than others as a result of these changes. To counteract this, a broad selection of skills have received a notable boost in damage at high levels. This won't bring their... See, this is what I don't get. If damage is the problem... Guys, if player damage is a problem, why move the damage from the support gems onto the skill? If damage is truly a problem and players are truly trivializing endgame bosses and encounters, and we're not seeing all of their animations that you'd like us to see, why are you giving the damage over here? If you really believe that nerfing stuff in the game is needed to slow the game down so players enjoy the game more, if that's what you're committed to, if that's what you believe is best, then just do it. Just say, guys, we're smacking everything. There's too much damage here. Why? That's interesting. It's very interesting. I don't know. This won't bring their 6-link damage back to where it was before the reduction of the support gem power. It just makes sure they're not punished more than other ones by the changes. This predominantly affects skills that use melee weapons. Okay, so we got the melee rework, and now melee kind of getting a little help, but melee is also kind of getting smacked. But there are others affected too. In general, skills that use melee weapons have had a 25% damage increase at gem level 20 and are unchanged at gem level 1. Okay, so if they're getting a 25% damage increase, but there are support gems on average that are between 20% to 40% less damage, the builds that are getting buffed by this are the melee builds that are only getting reduced by 20% and adding 25%, and so they will therefore be 5% stronger. Am I doing the math right? Oh my goodness. I love this game. Here's an example of a melee attack that has had its damage increased at gem level 20, Ground Slam. All right, so there's Ground Slam. This has the nice side effect of making gem level for these attack skills matter more, and the potential for a 4-linked secondary melee skill like Ancestral Warchief to have barely lost damage. An Ancestral Warchief supported by melee physical damage support, pulverized support, and multi-strike, which now applies to totems, oh, interesting, has only lost 2.5% damage after the damage buff. At the same time, we realize that slams have been overperforming relative to other melee builds for a while. Yeah, like since the slam rework and other things didn't get buffed. As a result, we have changed Seismic Cry to no longer provide more damage to exerted attacks. Warcry-empowered slams were incredibly powerful, as slams received a damage bonus from Seismic Cry that non-slam melee skills didn't have access to. Wah, wah. All right, so these changes to Seismic Cry, you can read them here. This brings slams more in line with other skills when enhanced by Warcries, though they still have the advantage of some slow specific mechanics that are specific to slams, like the Fist of War support gem. The support gem changes affect 6-link skills far more than they do those with fewer links. In other words, hey, you can play this gem until you get your 4-link, up to your 4-link as you level through the 10x story campaign, and hopefully it won't suck. Hopefully it won't feel terrible to play on a 4-link, but it'll definitely scale off as you get to maps. Because of how each support gem compounds with each other, so the damage loss won't be felt much in the early game and mid game. Yeah, that's why they moved the damage onto the skill gem, away from the supports and onto the skill gem itself. That way you can actually level with it, and when you're on a 3-link and a 4-link, you can get through the 10x story campaign, but then once you get to maps, it'll drop off, and you have to figure it out. You have to figure out where you're going to get your damage from. As support gems were generally nerfed far less or not at all at gem level 1, there will be cases during the campaign where buff skills will have more damage than before, especially for players that struggle to find or craft 5 or 6-link items early in the league. So there you go. Wow, so if you're having a hard time, it's okay. It's okay because your buff skills, they're going to be good. They're going to be good. It's going to feel good to level through the campaign, even though we increased monster level speed and monster level difficulty and monster HP and monster damage throughout the 10x story campaign. We believe that things should be made more difficult for players. We're making it so that way it feels good, guys. That's just what I don't understand. Like, on the one hand, if you think the campaign needs to be harder, make it harder. Make it brutal. If you want Path of Exile to be this grueling, visceral, just absolute struggle for survival. Oh, I can't even crawl off the beach and kill Hillock, man. Like, if you want it to be that, then just do it. Oh my gosh, I feel like Shia LaBeouf right now. Just do it, GGG. If you don't, if you think that Zoom Zoom builds are really popular over the last couple of years, I don't know, because maybe they really are. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's always interesting to read these manifestos and go, okay, you guys say the goal is for us to experience, less player power, and for the 10X story campaign to be more challenging. But then you're like, but don't worry, it won't be that bad. It's like somebody who's like, hey, what do you want for lunch? And like, I could really go for a burger right now. And I'm like, okay, how about I get you a salad? I'm like, well, I mean, I'll eat the salad, but why did you ask me if you were going to get me the burger? Oh, well, I just wanted to ask you. If the goal is make it harder, then do that. If the goal was you're going to order the lunch anyway, you order the lunch. Why are you asking me for my input? Why are you saying, hey, we want to make it more difficult, but then also saying, oh, don't worry. While you level, you won't experience, it'll feel good. On a 4-link now, you're actually more like what a 6-link is now. What? We've numerically buffed the increased critical strike support, increased critical damage support, and the Nightblade support as they were seeing relatively little use for builds that were invested in critical strike, making sure their effect is more in line with other support gems for a build invested in criticals. See, to me that's interesting. So they're buffing the support gems related to critical strike, which earlier they said, hey, we're not buffing support gems that are quality of life stuff because we think the interesting interaction in and of themselves should be the cool thing about it, not the numbers. And then with critical strike support, critical damage, and Nightblade, they're like, hey, we're buffing the numbers. Are there different people in different departments who are making different calls on putting together? I'm so out of touch. I'm just a boomer. I'm an old balding boomer. That's it. I'm just a guy living life, cosplaying as a Hierophant. At the top end of character progression, we found that Awakened support gems provided too significant of a damage increase over regular support gems. Really? You've got to be kidding me. You mean stuff that's just literally numerically better than the regular stuff would be worth going after and using? If you had 5 Awakened support gems, your 6-link damage could be as high as 50% more damage compared to having regular support gems. That's why you guys designed that a year ago. Over a year ago. The quality of Awakened support gems is now the same as on the base support gem. In some cases, such as Awakened Generosity's level of supported aura skill gems, we have added the quality stat as a reward for leveling the gem to level 5 instead. We have also taken this opportunity to make mana multipliers on support gems more consistent. In general, mana multipliers have gone up slightly, but several gems have had mana multipliers lowered as a result of this pass. Archmage has had its damage based on the mana cost of the supported skill lowered 60% of the mana cost from 108% at level 20. Wow. Yeah. That's a huge hit to Archmage. Everybody that's like, oh yeah, well Archmage was stupid and it was in the meta. Okay, that's fine. Like on the one hand, GGG's like, hey, here's something that's not getting used. You guys aren't playing Archmage, so we're going to buff it a couple times. Then players play it. You guys are using Archmage. We're going to smack it. It now also sets your spell mana cost to be 5% of your maximum unreserved mana instead of 6%, as support gem mana multipliers were generally increased across the board. That makes sense. This will be a significant reduction in damage as mana builds use Archmage were very strong, both offensively and defensively. Yep, they were. That's why players used them. Something else will be strong for 315, and players will use it. And then it'll get smacked for 316, and it'll be something different for 316. We've changed the quality bonuses for a variety of support gems that didn't make a lot of sense for the base gem. For these, we focused on those that provide speed. For example, GMP now gives projectile damage instead of attack and cast speed. Chain now gives increased chaining range instead of projectile speed, with projectile speed becoming its anomalous quality instead at a lower value. Okay, I like that. That makes sense. Faster projectiles now grants a further increase to projectile speed instead of attack and cast speed, with the divergent quality becoming increased damage instead. There are lots of individual changes that have been made to support gems, which will be revealed in the patch notes tomorrow. Patch notes when? Patch notes tomorrow. Okay, so here's the flask system rework. Here's the long extended discussion on it, and let's get to the new stuff. So that's all stuff from the live stream. Okay, the flask rebalance has mostly affected utility flasks, you don't say. Some have been reworked. The most notable change that hasn't been announced yet is to the Diamond Flask. It previously granted your critical strikes are lucky. This single effect provided a massive boost to your critical strike chance, more than any one source in the game. Yep, that's why players would use them, especially on lightning-based builds, because then, high rolls. Because flasks no longer provide that much power, it has been changed to provide 100% increased critical strike chance instead, more in line with the power of other flasks. Note that this can now be affected by increases to flask effect, and the ability to roll the Surgeon's prefix on this flask type has been restored. With the changes to Diamond Flask, we didn't want the Sulfur Flask to be the best critical strike flask, so enemies on consecrated ground no longer have additional base chance to be critically hit. Woo! Okay. That is a nerf. That is a nerf. Wow. We have also improved some underused utility flasks. When you say improved, you use that word. I do not think that word means what you think it means. We have improved some underused utility flasks, such as Ruby, Topaz, and Sapphire flasks, which now have a base duration of 5 seconds from 4 and consume 20 of 50 charges on use, down from 30 of 60. Okay, so you get like 2.5 uses. So they're able to be used more, and this has naturally improved the unique flask that use these base types. Unique flasks have all been reviewed, and many have been rebalanced or reworked. Like, why would they not promote this? I just don't get their promotion timeline or their announcement timeline anymore. Why wouldn't they say, hey, 3.15 is coming and a rebalancing of flasks is coming? Like, we're reworking flasks, like that, how they announced bows and stuff. Is it because it's a meme? Is it because whenever they announce a rework of something, we go, oh yeah, bows are going to be better this league, and we know that it's a nerf coming? Is that why? Have they learned that when they preview stuff too early, people get up in arms about it too soon? I mean, that's the sort of feedback that you want from your player base, though, isn't it? Maybe it's not enough time for them to actually go in and change. I don't know. That's interesting. In general, those flasks that multiplied damage or provided massive defenses have had this damage bonus reduced significantly. Certain unique flasks have instead received penalties to flask uptime instead of reducing their powerful stats. For example, Dying Sun still grants 15 to 25% area of effect and 2 additional projectiles, but now consumes more flask charges and has a lower duration. With an Enkindling Orb that provides flask effect, you can get 3 additional projectiles, and when combined with the Pathfinder Ascendancy or items and some passive skills, that can become 4 additional projectiles relatively easily. With an Enkindling Orb that provides duration, you can offset some of the uptime penalties on the flasks. Okay, so that's the same thing that we do from the live stream. They're taking some of the quality of life of flasks, or some of the options for quality of life, and turning it into currency that you have to roll it. The introduction of Enkindling Orbs in combination with unique utility flasks has opened up some interesting new interactions. Coruscating Elixir is on the Ruby Flask base type, which, as mentioned above, had its base duration increased from 4 seconds to 5. When combined with the duration Enkindling Orb outcome, it now has a duration of over 15 seconds. Look at that. Chaos damage does not bypass energy shield during effect. Removes all but 1 life on use. Removed life is regenerated as ES over 2 seconds. And that's got 15.5 seconds. Yeah, so you don't need to... Yeah, that's interesting. That could be interesting. That could be interesting. It could also just be one of those interactions where you go, I think that's interesting, and then it never ends up being interesting. But it's possible. We have also added 45% increased flask duration to the passive tree, lowering the amount given by cluster jewel notables as a result. This combination of mechanics has implications with a certain unique belt, cough, soul thirst, cough. Replica Rumi's Concoction has a huge duration reduction, but with the duration Enkindling Orb effect, you can nullify this, providing massive defense if you cancel out the slowing effect while you have enough flask charges. We've also taken this opportunity to review Flask passive skills. Flask effect is now mostly found around the ranger area of the tree, and some new passives have been added. Now see, this is interesting. Path of Exile, one of the things that makes Path of Exile so unique is that the passive tree isn't totally centered around character starting locations, right? One of the reasons why Path of Exile is such a unique game, not just a unique action RPG as an experience, but as a unique game, is because it really isn't class-based gameplay. While there are class-based models or class-based characters that you start at different positions on the passive tree, oftentimes you can stretch your character out. You could pick a ranger that hangs out mostly in the Inquisitor side of the tree. You could build a marauder that goes and hangs out in the witch side of the tree. You can build a duelist that spends some time in the Templar side of the tree or in the shadow side of the tree. Because your build isn't limited based on your character. You're limited a little bit based on your starting location, but because there's stuff that used to be, at least originally, kind of sprinkled throughout the tree, there was a draw to building a character and not being locked into a particular class. But this sort of move, I clap my hands at it because I go, okay, there's so much stuff, like just by nature of necessity, there's going to be some stuff that naturally fits in with some characters simply based on a point value efficiency of how many points on the passive tree it takes you to get there. And so there's going to be some stuff that's just closer to some starting areas that it's more efficient to play that particular character. And so by moving stuff near ascendancies that ascendancies are already going to line up with near those characters on the passive tree, that I think is in some way a good thing because it really does reward you if you go all in on something that you're just there in that side of the tree. But on the other hand, again, it kind of goes against a core design philosophy of what makes PoE interesting, and that is, that there's these unique interactions. It's kind of an admittance. Hey, if you're playing around Flasks, you're going to be playing Pathfinder anyway, so we're just going to put this stuff over by Pathfinder. Like over where a Pathfinder character is going to be. As opposed to, hey, you're playing a Templar and you want to have a bunch of Flask effects because you're doing something weird and off meta and you're creating interactions that are interesting and you're not just trying to blow everything up and skip animations. Like the whole thing that the entire introduction of the Manifesto said they were aiming for. But anyway, it's interesting. Like, I applaud it because it means that players are going to be rewarded for really being efficient with their tree in one particular area. But on the other hand, it's kind of interesting. It feels like it goes against a little bit of some of their design goals. The Enduring Mana Flask no longer penalizes duration, so you have to press the button less, but it causes the flask to provide much less mana than before. Especially now that using a flask slot for a Mana Flask is a smaller loss of power, it has been rebalanced to provide a more appropriate level of mana recovery. The Adrenaline modifier on flasks now gives far less movement speed, 6 to 8% increased movement speed, down from 20 to 30%, putting more of a focus on enhancing the Quicksilver Flask effect with associated costs, rather than rolling a single modifier that granted almost as much speed as the Quicksilver Flask itself. The Iron Skin and Reflexes suffixes have also been reduced, granting 40 to 60% increased armor or evasion, down from 60 to 100%. Oh, why do you keep smacking player defenses? Why? Like, if you want me to enjoy a fight longer, then I need to be able to survive during it. I guess maybe GGG could just be saying, hey, G3 Iron, you need to just get good and learn how to dodge everything and learn the different fights and the different animations of stuff. Maybe that's what they really want. I've played Dark Souls 3 on stream before. A lot of you in the community watched it. I played it over on Twitch and played Dark Souls 3. I'm terrible at it. It spent me, I spent like, what, 4 hours or 3 hours or 3.5 hours or 5 hours on stream, like not getting very far. I think it took us the first hour to kill like the first guy, like not the first monster that we encountered, but like the first fight, like the first boss fight. And like the first couple skeletons, like we just kept fighting over. Like, if they just want the game to be Dark Souls because it's so difficult and you just have to manage to manually dodge everything. I mean, okay. One of the reasons why I personally, this is not me speaking about game design in general. This is now just me personally speaking out, not about what's best for a game or a community. Me personally, I enjoy games that you can gear check your way through. I do enjoy that. There's something to that. I don't enjoy gear checking, making the entire game trivial. I enjoy that there's moments of challenge and moments where you go, okay, I really need to upgrade my gear because my gear is not good enough. Or, okay, I really need to improve my gameplay because my gameplay is not good enough. But games that are just skill-based and you can't gear check your way past hardly anything, that's kind of a bummer. Maybe I'm just getting too old. Maybe grinding gear games is just saying, hey, Iron, you're getting too old. In addition to changes on how flask modifiers protect from ailments, we are also reworking how players mitigate ailments in some other ways. The intent here is there shouldn't be a simple low investment option for any character to mitigate every single ailment. All right, so is choosing an ascendancy a low investment option? That's interesting. Because that's kind of going to be what it's worth, right? If they're changing things for ascendancies, we'll see. You should focus on mitigating the effects you're most threatened by and just reducing the effects of those you can probably handle. Or I can just build a build that kills everything instantly, right? For example, the change to Aquamarine Flask to specifically reduce the effect of freeze will let you continue to act while frozen without mitigating it entirely. If you craft your Aquamarine Flask to maximize flask effect, it can reduce a freeze to the point of it being mostly ignored. Why not just wear an Alpha's Howl? I'll just wear an Alpha's Howl. I cannot be frozen and I can wear a whole bunch of auras. And then I can use my flask slot for damage. Why would I care about an Aquamarine Flask? I don't know. Maybe that's too reductionist of me. Maybe that's too reductionist of me, but that's how I'm feeling. Maybe I'm just feeling a little reductionist. That's what I'm going to go tell Mrs. Draconis later. Hey, Mrs. Draconis, you know what I'm feeling right now? I'm feeling a little reductionist, baby, if you know what I'm saying. We've made a number of changes to mechanics that protect against all elemental ailments at once. Yep, most ascendancy skills that mitigated all ailments now provide partial or no mitigation. We just said that. Did we not just say that? Oh, for example, the Raider now grants 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments while phasing instead of full elemental ailment immunity while phasing. But Raider spent like 1 league not on the very bottom of the popularity charts, and this is what happens to it. Oh, man. I love it. Necromancer, Champion, Assassin, Elementalist. You're welcome to stay at the top of the Ascendancy popularity charts for as long as you want. Raider, if you dare move from the last or second to last spot for any period of time, we're going to smack you so hard we will rework flasks and we will rework the entire ailment immunity system that makes you attractive. We will do it if you move up from being popular for 1 league. Oh, man. This change means Raiders don't trivialize elemental ailments from the get-go, but can still get full mitigation with a little bit of investment elsewhere. The Hero Font and the Pathfinder, it's interesting because they said low investment, but a little bit of investment. So they must think that there's a difference between low investment and a little bit of investment. I'm sorry. I'm getting silly. I'm sorry. The Hierophant and the Pathfinder retain some level of elemental ailment mitigation, while the Inquisitor and the Elementalist no longer have any at all, as we felt the Ascendancy passives that provided the elemental ailment mitigation alongside other properties were sufficiently powerful without it. Because lots of players these last couple of leagues have been playing Elementalist for the ailment immunity, right? Not for Golemance. Totally get it. Totally get it, guys. Do you ever feel like sometimes some things just get balanced? Like they got a hat that's got all the mechanics in the game in it, and they just pull stuff out, and they're like, "This is what we want. This is what we want to hit this league." Modifiers on gear that mitigate all elements have also been reviewed and generally lowered in power, so it's a much higher gear and passive skill investment to gain immunity to every ailment at once, making it more reasonable to focus on mitigating the specific ailments that are most problematic for your build. I can't wait until somebody just comes out with a build like on day 3 that's like, hey, this is how you get elemental ailment immunity. You use these 2 uniques, you use this cluster jewel, and you use this ascendancy. Bada boom. Is that low investment or is that high investment? YouTube videos got 50,000 upvotes and 1.4 million views, right? Hey guys, this is how you get elemental ailment immunity. These 2 uniques, this cluster jewel, this ascendancy. Bada boom. Hey. We want to provide new avenues for players to mitigate bleed, corrupted blood, and curses, given how common bleed and curse removal flasks were. As a result, we have added extra support on the passive tree to mitigate bleeding, corrupted blood, and curses through new stats on existing notables or a new passive cluster. Okay, that's interesting. We've also made some minor changes to Pantheon powers. That's pretty cool. That's the first time those have been touched since 3.0, right? Right? Pantheon powers came in 3.0 with the release of Oriath. The upgraded Soul of Relikesh now grants you cannot gain corrupted blood while there are at least 5 corrupted blood stacks on you. And the upgraded Soul of Ugil now grants 20% reduced effect of or curses on you. Is that supposed to be reduced effect of curses on you? Replacing their previous bonuses. That's okay. They've written thousands of words. One typo is acceptable. It's okay. They're doing fine. Don't hate on that. Poison. Poison now inherently deals 50% more damage. Viper Strike? Viper Strike, anybody? Yeah? Cobra Lash? Yeah? We didn't like that poison builds felt pigeonholed into playing assassin due to the extremely strong poison-related bonuses and relied heavily on the Corralito's signature unique flask in the late game. What about those of us who didn't play assassin and we played Pathfinder? Ooh, this is a big buff to those players. We've reduced the power of the assassin's poison notable passives to be more in line with the kind of damage increases an ascendancy usually gives. See, that sort of sentence is like, hey, we designed this thing too big. And so now we recognize that it's too big in comparison to other things, so we're bringing it back. Game design is really hard. It's really, really hard. And it's really hard in a game that's as complex in Path of Exile. But it's interesting, again, that the goals that they state about reining in player power, and then they give us new tools and new player power by huge portions, like every league. Like Harvest was OP, and then they gave us Heist with like Heist fracturing and stuff. And fracturing had been around for a long time. It's so interesting. It's so interesting what the team is finite. Like, we can all meme about small indie company, whatever, but the team at Grinding Gear Games is finite. They're limited. They're not millions of players playing the game. And so there should be grace from the community to the developers. We should not be toxic. We should not direct any kind of hatred towards the developers that millions of players discovered something that only, a little over 100 people didn't figure out. That there's no shame in that. But it's a really tough job to design games and to constantly have games as a live service where you're constantly saying, okay, maybe this decision was a mistake. Maybe we didn't do this right. Maybe we didn't do this correctly, or maybe we should tweak this. That's really tough to constantly be walking things back. It's just got to be a big psychological toll, I would think, on the team to constantly be walking things back, which in some regard makes me go, hey guys, wouldn't you want to be a little bit slower in releasing things? But I get it's a company and you got to release. As a company, they survive on 4 releases a year. They got to do it. So, I guess I'm simply trying to account some sympathy, while at the same time also saying, aren't you kind of bringing this onto yourself? Like, is buffing poison? In other words, is buffing poison by 50%? Is this going to be something that in 2 leagues they're like, hey, poison is dealing too much damage now on a bunch of other ascendancies that aren't assassins. And we really want assassins to feel unique in their interactions with poisons. So therefore, poison buffs are now going to be, 12% better with the assassin. Like, is that where we're going to be at in 317? Hey, the assassin's really dropped off in popularity, and so we're bringing the assassin back and giving him some notable stuff about poisons. Anyway, I feel like sometimes we kind of go into that cycle of development. I do feel like that. After years of reading these, I do kind of feel like that's a pattern. We've reduced the power of Assassin's Poison notable passives to be more in line with this kind of damage increases an Ascendancy usually gives. Noxious Strike no longer has the 30% to damage over time multiplier for poison, and the increased poison duration for each poison you have inflicted recently is now capped at 100%. Toxic Delivery now has poison you inflict with critical strikes deals 25% more damage, down from 50%. Coralito's signature has been reworked to more directly benefit from poison builds dealing critical strikes rather than any poison build. Okay, so scale up your crit if you're using Coralitos. The Pathfinder's Master Toxicist, Toxicist. There you go. The Pathfinder's Master Toxicist. I am not cutting that out of the final video, by the way. I'm leaving my struggling, stuttering, glorious delivery of that in. Notable has received a smaller nerf, now causing poisons you inflict during any flask effect to have a 20% chance to deal 100% more damage, up from 30% while keeping its poison spread mechanic. Nice! The overall result is that poison builds should feel far better earlier on and now allow for a wider selection of variable ascendancy choices, such as the Occultist. Why are you mentioning the Occultist? Does this mean patch notes we're going to see something poison related to Occultist? Huh. Poison builds were also guilty of having a particularly uninteresting array of support gems. Yeah, basically all the same ones. With most purely providing an unconditional more damage multiplier. We have reworked the poison support gem to now be called the Critical Strike Affliction Support. You mean all of the poison builds that I've ever played before, how they only change out like basically the main gem and one other support gem and the other 4 support gems are all the same? You mean that's not healthy? Okay, that's interesting. This support gem provides damage over time multiplier to damaging ailments from critical strikes, so it can also be used with ignites and bleeds too. The lesser poison support has been renamed to Chance to Poison support. Okay, I like that. I like that. I like name changes. Note this change affects all monsters as well. As in general, we felt poisons applied from monsters were unthreatening compared to other damaging ailments. It's because they weren't. However, we have lowered the poison damage of certain monsters that had significantly powerful poisons already, such as the Al-Hazameen, the Hunter, such that the overall result is no damage buff compared to before. So, we feel like poison is too powerful on some guys, but not powerful enough on others. Okay. Cool. No comment. I'm not going to paint. Ailment thresholds. Now that player damage has been reduced, we've reviewed our ailment threshold calculations to compensate for the lower damage of fully supported skills. It's now much easier to apply stronger non-damaging ailments on enemies with less damage, especially on skills less heavily supported. We've also lowered the ailment threshold of particularly tough endgame encounters so that chill and shock investment is worthwhile on these encounters. Boy, their threshold is now only slightly higher than regular map bosses. Oh, so we can shock big bad boys now. Okay, that's fun. As a much requested quality of life change, players can now see the effect of non-damaging elemental ailments on enemies themselves. So you can finally determine how powerful your shocks are on enemies and thus know what benefit they are giving you. Yes! Yes! Let us see the effects of the skills that we're doing. Let us see that. Players like that. Players like that kind of feedback in games. Yeah, we like that. This also applies to ailments applied to you and the buff granted to you by the cruelty support. Okay, I like that. See that right here in the picture? It's kind of like right here in the picture, right where I'm dragging this little image of the picture over here. Right underneath the name of the Suncaller Asha, you can see that the percentage of the shock is right there where it says resist elemental damage and resist chaos, and then right underneath there. I can't read it because my eyes are so bad, but that's like 13%, 15%, 19%. I don't know. Chicken dinner to whoever can actually read that. Trigger effect costs, relevant from the live stream, blah, 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 blah. Okay, as mentioned on the live stream, most triggered skills now cost mana. This was changed to add an additional opportunity cost to trigger builds, as they already bypass various restrictions like cast time. Yeah, that's kind of what's cool about trigger builds. It's kind of like the whole point of playing trigger builds. It's like doing those cool, interesting, unique interactions that you said earlier in the manifesto. Hey, we want you to do more cool, interesting, unique interactions. Some triggers have higher costs than others, most notably cast on damage taken, which previously had no cost at all outside of taking up sockets. Some positive results of this change are that Archmage can now apply to triggered skills, and Reap now gains blood charges when triggered. Spells triggered with Molnir or cast on death don't require you to pay the cost. Oh, that's good. So glad I don't have to pay the cost on cast on death builds. That's a good meme. That's a good joke, guys. That's a good joke. Sometimes they like to include jokes for us to laugh at. That's a good meme. Flame Dash, Dash, and Smoke Mine. Many patches ago, we greatly buffed certain skills that were cooldown gated, most notably Flame Dash, Smoke Mine, and Dash. They provide a huge amount of mobility and travel speed with little opportunity cost, so we've lowered their values to be more appropriate for their investment. Smoke Mine has been most heavily affected. It now gives a 1 second burst of speed. The speed starts at 20% and scales up to 29%, so its speed growth is an extreme at no cost. Its smoke cloud size has been increased. It now has a cooldown of 5 seconds rather than 2.5. Whoa! And has no cooldown recovery as it levels. Chris mentioned in the live stream that the changes to these skills are not huge numerical nerfs. Smoke Mine is the exception. Yeah, we're just doubling the cooldown time. But I guess that's not considered huge. Maybe that's one of those minor investment or little investment sort of thing. That's pretty big. But that's not a shot at Chris. Don't take that as, oh, Iron, you took a shot at Chris. Guys, when you're live stream presenting stuff and clarifying stuff in real time, that's tough to do. This is the benefit of written communication versus oral live communication. Like, you can go back and you can edit things. So you can say, hey, wait, what are we actually doing in the game? Rather than telling one person, hey, remember every single thing we're doing in the game. And credit to Chris, he remembers basically everything in the game for the last 15 years of development. Okay, so Smoke Mine is the exception. However, despite that, it is still very good at achieving the purpose of giving the player mobility and utility benefits. It is still very good for evading damage and traversing across areas. Dash's cooldown time is now 2.5 seconds from 2 and has 0 to 19% increased cooldown recovery rate, down from 0 to 57%. Yeah. Flame Dash's cooldown time is now 3.5 seconds, up from 3, and has 0 to 19% increased cooldown recovery rate from 0 to 47. Its cast time is now 0.8 seconds from 0.7, but it still retains its cast time bypass if not used in rapid succession. The second wind support gem has been changed to have a much higher mana multiplier and a penalty rather than a boost to cooldown recovery speed. So it's now a choice rather than a support gem you'd always use on a skill if you had a socket to spare, and doesn't provide such a growth and uptime for the above skills. So the choice is now, do you want the additional use or not? Would you rather have faster cooldown, or would you rather have an additional use? I like that design. That's an interesting design. That's an interesting player choice about the player's character that they play and the play style of the player piloting the character. That's interesting. It's not just a numerical nerf. It is genuinely a design change. Okay. Arcane Surge now provides increased mana regeneration rather than a percentage of mana per second, and no longer provides an increase to cast speed. This means it now provides slightly more mana recovery at low levels before you've invested in mana regeneration, and works better with clarity, but doesn't multiply with increases to mana regeneration at higher levels. Okay, that's interesting. So Arcane Surge, better early, right? So you use it with clarity as you're leveling, and then maybe not necessarily later on in the game. Oh, but that's interesting. That's also a nerf to Hierophant into just having Arcane Surge. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's kind of just a straight. No, that is just a straight nerf. Yeah, this is just a straight nerf to Arcane Surge for the vast majority of the game. Fortify effect. Fortify is intended to be a natural benefit of playing a melee character, not a primary defense to invest in. Then why did you put it on the passive tree? For players to put points in to invest in. Over time, we've introduced larger values and more sources of Fortify effect, to the point where it can almost be completely mitigate damage from hits. We're aiming for having 40% less damage taken from hits with Fortify being on the upper end of defensive power achievable with heavy investment. So you can't rely entirely on Fortify. Hence, all sources of Fortify effect have been reviewed, almost all significantly nerfed or replaced with something that is okay to be stacked. Like, here's the thing. Why do I want to build a defensive character that can see all of the defense, like all of the animations of a monster? I don't have defensive options to have my guy. You know what's really cool? This is the illustration that I'll use of this. I used to play Righteous Fire a lot. I used to play hardcore Righteous Fire in Path of Exile a lot. And it was pretty cool in a hardcore league to be able to have a character where you would just be like, what? Oh, my kid wants a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm going to go make them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you forgot to log out. You forgot to go to your hideout. You forgot to portal. And you just walk away. But your hardcore character would still be alive because of how many layers of defenses your character had, even though there's stuff like wailing on your character in hardcore. That would happen to me. And one of the reasons why I stopped playing hardcore all the time was because I had so many kids. Me and Mr. Cronus had so many kids, and we got 4 kids. And oh my goodness, that's a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to make. It's a lot of AFK breaks away from playing hardcore. And so, you lose enough characters doing that, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and you've got to choose. You've got to choose. Are you going to keep playing hardcore, or are you going to continue making your children food so that way they can eat? And I choose to make my food children so they can eat, and I play softcore for the most part now. But here's my point. Having multiple different defensive layer options is interesting, and maybe it comes at the penalty of passive points or of itemization or even of crafting on your itemization specific roles that will give you defense as you sacrifice offensive power. So you don't blow stuff up as quick, but stuff also doesn't blow you up as quick. But in order to make the game harder, it seems like through today's development manifesto, the theme has been we're nerfing defensive values, and we're also trying to curtail offensive values. But that just makes me want to double down on playing a zero HP or a one HP CI raider that just runs all over the place and can still one-shot the screen. Because I have even less defensive options now. Like, unless I super duper heavily invest in just Fortify, because it'll be a lot of passive points to do that. We don't know how many yet. Patch notes when? Well, they're tomorrow. But, or later today, depending on the world, where in the world you are when you're watching this. But that part of the reason why players want to kill stuff so fast in Path of Exile is because stuff kills them. Having fewer defensive options. Like, one of the coolest builds that I've ever seen was, and we did a video on it. We covered it here at Good Guy Gaming. Back in the day, was a completely damage immune, like elemental and physical damage immune Pathfinder. And it took the character, like, I don't even remember if it was 6 minutes or 7 minutes to kill a Phoenix, but it couldn't take damage. It was completely damage immune. With the way how the character was built. This was several years ago. It was before they put a cap on max elemental resistances, and it was before that they had reworked elemental flask resistances on flasks. So players could reduce the damage that they were taking and essentially raise the cap of their elemental resistances up to 100%. So you went CI, you raised all of your elemental resistances up to 100%, and then I think they used Immortal Call or they used something else for the physical damage. Oh no, they were converting physical damage to elemental damage, so they became immune to that. Damage over time they weren't immune to, but they were immune to hits, right? So it was a build that was immune to hits, and so then they just went in and they would kill bosses. But it took them a long time because of the amount of investment and the amount of passive points, the amount of itemization. Like, they didn't have a whole bunch of passive points and a whole ascendancy left over and a whole bunch of item slots. And cluster jewels weren't a thing at the time. They didn't have all of that resources to put into damage. They had put it all into a character that would not die, and it took them several minutes to kill, a tier 16 Shaper Guardian. Players don't do that because it's more efficient and it's more effective and it's less dangerous to just go in and instantly phase the Phoenix. To just put all of your resources into blowing the Phoenix up and just saying screw defenses. Unless you're playing hardcore or hardcore solo self-found. If you're playing softcore, you got 6 portals. And players rarely even use the 6 portals. Players who know what they're doing and who build for damage, they just go in and they use 1 portal and they clear the whole map, they kill the boss, and out they go. So, I don't know. Reviewing sources of damage over time multiplier. This powerful damage bonus for damage over time skills has benefited disproportionately from cluster jewels. Has it really? Damage over time multiplier? Like, players are actually playing dot builds, and so that's okay. Taking importance away from other sources. The reason why cluster jewels outshine other sources is because there's not that many sources. We've replaced all sources of the stat on non-notable cluster jewel passive skills with the standard damage increase to be consistent with other medium cluster jewels with damage bonuses, and lowered the values or replaced the stat entirely on cluster jewel notables. Okay, that's kind of fair. I mean, on the one hand, like, hey, if you've got passives on the passive tree that say, let's say 5% or 4% increase to dot, it doesn't make a whole huge amount of sense for cluster jewels to say, well, it's a 6% increase to dot on this cluster jewel. On the one hand, that makes sense, sort of. There is an opportunity cost with cluster jewels. One, you actually have to acquire them. They are an item. And two, they take up a lot of passive points to get to. I'm not even talking about the passive points that you have to spend on the cluster jewel. They just take passive points to get to. You've got a branch to get there, and then once you get there, generally there's 2 simply rather empty stats or attribute stats that you've got to get before you can get to the actual jewel node to put the cluster jewel in, and then there's however many different passives that you've got to spend before you get to the notable or just several of these more powerful stats. But again, the power is kind of already baked into the fact that you've had to reach out and use a cluster jewel to begin with. So I could go either way on that. I get trying to bring it in line, but I feel like cluster jewels in and of themselves already have an opportunity cost. That's why they're more powerful. It's because they have an opportunity cost already included in them. If there were regular jewels and you could put them anywhere on the tree, then maybe I would buy that. But because you have to put them on specific spots on the outside of the tree, that's a part of your gameplay and a part of your character choice already, is that you're going to the outside of the tree to get access to those cluster jewels. So I see that as opportunity cost there. So that's why I would argue it makes sense for them to have a slightly better stat. But either way, to put more importance on weapons, we've changed the large specific damage over time multiplier modifier on weapons to be a suffix rather than a prefix with no reduction in power. This makes it more in line with its intended equivalent, critical strike multiplier. You'll now be able to obtain a better damage over time weapon than ever before. I like that they have the +1 mana gained on kill on the roll on this hypnotic knell. Like, just to show you guys, this is a weapon that could drop for you. +2 levels for gems, increase fire damage, increase fire dot, increase spell damage, increase elemental because it's a void scepter, and then +1 mana gained on kill. That's just a good meme. All right, veiled mods. After the rework to the Veiled item system in 3.14, we reviewed how the Veiled Chaos Orb and Aceling crafts from Betrayal safe houses work, and have made some changes to make crafting less deterministic in the outcomes, as the Unveiled modifiers can be very powerful additions to an item. Veiled modifiers no longer count as crafted modifiers, so you can't easily remove them if you add the wrong modifier type while Aceling crafting. This has the advantage of now being able to block modifiers you do not want to unveil. By crafting a mod you don't want to unveil on the item prior to unveiling. Okay, so they're adding a step. They're adding a step to veiled mod crafting. That's, I kind of feel like there's some synthesis aspect to that. Maybe that's just me wanting to read synthesis into everything. But it used to be with synthesis, you would try to find specific items that all had like the same stat line on it in order to guarantee a specific outcome. Because the outcome would ultimately be randomized based on certain factors, but you would try to mitigate that randomization, right? That's what PoE crafting is all about, regardless if it's synthesis or something else. It's about limiting the random outcomes that you possibly have. And so now Exile crafting is another way to do that. That's kind of cool. That's interesting. Exiling's crafting bench. I bet this means well, you can't do it on Paradoxica though because it's unique. I was going to say that'd be interesting to use for Paradoxica, but it's unique. Exiling's crafting bench that adds a veiled modifier now first removes a random modifier, so it is riskier to use as a later step of item crafting rather than being an obvious final step because it is of a very consistent modifier pool. Okay. Veiled Chaos Orb can no longer be used to get multiple veiled modifiers on an item. Previously, this was possible, taking advantage of meta crafting modifiers or fractured modifiers. Dual attribute modifiers can no longer be rolled with other modifiers that grant flat amounts of attributes of the same type, the exception being those that grant all attributes. We didn't like that the veiled modifiers felt mandatory to get the highest amount of flat attributes of a specific item type. All right, here we go. We're in the home stretch. Here's other changes and then buffs to underperforming skills. Okay, so here we go. There's a host of other smaller changes which you'll be able to read about in the patch notes. Here's a few specific ones to justify a brief explanation. Focus's cooldown no longer expires while it's active, as players were able to keep focus up almost permanently, which provided a huge amount of benefits. You can invest in keeping it up more, but you won't be able to keep it up consistently. This is especially important as it's now one of the few sources of your critical strike chances lucky from a specific focus modifier. See, again, I'm of the opinion that if you go all in with your character to get something in this game, you should really get that thing. You shouldn't get other things. Like if you go all in on armor, then you shouldn't also be able to just have equal amounts of energy shield as somebody who went all in on energy shield. But if you go all in on focus, then you should just have a ridiculous amount of focus. Right? You shouldn't have like focus. It's like, well, I've got focus, but I also don't really care about focus. Like if you go all in on something, I really think you should get unique benefits to going all in on that thing that other players can't get without going all in on it. So, Golem Elementalist no longer provides increased damage per golem. The golem buff effects bonus on Liege of the Primordial now always provides 100% increased effective buffs granted by your golems rather than scaling with golem count. All right, so guys, this is where everybody needs to panic and say golems are terrible and Golementalist is awful and everybody should get off the hype train. And this nerf kills golems, so then that way the prices of the golem jewels are very, very low, so that way I can snatch them up early game and use that as my beginning end game item. So, at least I'm being transparent about, attempting to influence the market. Other people aren't transparent about it. We all try to influence the market. It's just how transparent are you about it, right? This ascendancy path was providing too much power and defense compared to other high investment ascendancy effects. It always provides 100% increased effective buffs granted by your golems rather than scaling with golem amount. Yeah, so it's now more heavily focused on the buffs granted by golems rather than generic effects. By changing the buff effect on Liege of the Primordial, it creates less of a reliance on having many golems and makes it more powerful in cases where players want to use just a few instead of feeling forced to invest into maximum golems through various unique items. But again, that's the point. That's the point. If you're playing Golementalist, you want a bunch of golems rolling around with you. That's the point. No? I mean, what's the point of having a bunch of golems rolling around with you now? Now it would just be damage, right? Because it's another source of damage doing damage. Which, aren't we trying to get away from just stuff being there to do damage? Aren't we trying to make it more interesting? I guess by reducing the number of golems, you're making it more interesting. That's got to be the argument there. The Raider's Ascendancy node Rapid Assault no longer provides onslaught effect. The Onslaught path was too easy a choice relative to the higher investment Frenzy Charge branch. We've also replaced movement speed on the small phasing passives with elemental damage, as there's already plenty of speed available on that Ascendancy. Raider it's not even popular. It's just not unpopular for one league, and then just absolutely punch the crap out of it, man. It no longer provides Onslaught effect. Why? Like, that's one of the only ways to get Onslaught. Somebody's going to correct me down below in the comments. That's like the only way. How else can you get more Onslaught effect? That's one of the only ways to get Onslaught effect in the game. That's what made it interesting and unique. Players aren't playing Inquisitor because they want Onslaught effect. They're playing Raider because of that. And they're comparing it to the other high investment Frenzy Charge branch. That's because Frenzy Charges aren't as good for speed and damage as Onslaught. All right, just read. Shut up and read it, Iron. Jeez. Okay. Abyss Jewels can no longer roll the modifier that grants a chance to gain Onslaught on kill. This low opportunity cost modifier was a no-brainer, providing strong attack, cast, and move speed values that devalued all other sources of Onslaught and were too strong for a single jewel modifier. All right, so now I'm waiting for 3.17 where they're going to reintroduce Onslaught on kill on some new item that they'll bring in with 317 or 316. That's what that tells me. Remember when they took off a bunch of crafting options off of Delve fossils, and they just spread them out? They just spread them out through other things. Sometimes they legitimately design things where they go, oh, this thing is too powerful, so they remove it for a few cycles and then they reintroduce it on another thing. Like we've all seen, those of us who have played for several leagues, you've seen it before. Still saying Exile? Where's Zana? Where's Zana when I need her? Spectral Shield Throw was used almost exclusively with its Threshold Jewel. Yeah, you guys designed Threshold Jewels to do that. Divide and conquer at high levels. Like, if you want to design Threshold Jewels to be interesting, then there need to be multiple Threshold Jewels for each skill gem. If there's just one skill gem or one Threshold Jewel per skill gem, then of course it becomes like required if you're going to play using that in any way, shape, or form, because there's no options. There's no other interesting options. Because of this, we've changed this skill to naturally have behavior similar to what Divide and Conquer applied. It will release all projectiles each time it chains, making it far stronger than before with sources of additional projectiles. Okay, cool. I know some players who are going to like that. And it comes with a number of chains. While reviewing this skill, we've made changes to all skills that deal damage based on shield defenses, greatly boosting their damage. These skills no longer gain critical strike chance per energy shield, a mechanic that was used very rarely. Instead, the Divide and Conquer Threshold Jewel has been reworked and is now called Seething Fury. All right, new names. We like new names. Seething Fury provides bonuses to critical strike chance and multiplier to shield charge, spectral shield throw, and shield crush. Okay, so you can use it for multiple skills now. So if this goes over well, at least in GGG's mind, I would expect them to do this with more Threshold Jewels. It's all based on the energy shield from your shield, making this an option for builds that want to use energy shield-based shields with these skills. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's pretty interesting. These mechanics have all been significantly reduced in power simply because they were too strong. Fire Burst was reduced in damage and has a slightly longer cooldown. Hollow Palm Technique now gives 40% more attack speed, down from 60. Yeah, that was deserved. Hollow Palm Technique was like, hey guys, I'm leveling a new character. What kind of character is it? It doesn't matter. I'm leveling a new character. Somebody get me Hollow Palm Technique. Like, Hollow Palm Technique for a while there was like having a tabula. It was just like, oh yeah, this is the default best thing to do when leveling. Or easiest. Maybe not best, but a lot of players used it in order to level up their various characters. Vol Ground Slam has had its damage adjusted and changed to having reduced enemy stun threshold to match Ground Slam instead of always stunning. Blade Blast has had its area lowered and no longer unnerves on hit, but has had its area multiplier with Blade Vortex increased to compensate. Yeah, but unnerf is pretty good. You can get unnerf from other sources, though. So I would still imagine some players would play Blade Blast. We have changed all existing unarmed unique items and stats to specifically work with melee skills. The upcoming skill Explosive Concoction was designed to work without any of these items. So Facebreakers, Doriani's Fist, Rigwald's Curse, Hollow Palm Technique, and Martial Artistry have been changed. Buffs to underperforming skills, as well as the aforementioned buffs to almost all skills that use melee weapons, a few bow skills, and cooldown traps. We've made some numerical buffs to a number of skills that weren't measuring up to their counterparts. As usual, we've buffed Firestorm. Okay, nice. The strike frequency of Lightning Spire Trap now scales. Okay, Seismic Trap. Yep, we heard about that. The rotation speed of Flamethrower Trap no longer scales with increases to cast speed. It can no longer be modified. I wonder if they upped it or if it's just the same base. Shock Nova's ring no longer deals 50% less damage and now deals full damage, so enemies in the ring take twice as much damage. Shock Nova builds incoming. Explosive Arrow now deals 5% more damage with hits and ailments per explosive arrow on the target. Ooh, that's a buff for PoE Royale, right? Sorry. Had a obligatory PoE Royale mention. Artillery Ballista now deals approximately 10% more damage at all gem levels. Ooh, who's league starting Artillery Ballista? Cricket. Okay. Ice Storm, granted by the Whispering Ice unique item, now deals 3 to 5 cold damage per 10 intelligence, up from 2 to 4 cold damage per 10 intelligence. Okay. All right. You might double that, and I still might not use it. You would have to do a lot in order for me to use a skill like Ice Storm. It's super slow. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm not playing Ice Storm. Maybe that's the character. I mentioned that earlier in the video. Maybe the character that GGG wants us to play is an Ice Storm based character. Maybe that's what they're going for, so we can see all of the various animations of the monsters that we're encountering on our journeys through Rayclast and Oriath. Body Swap now has a base radius of 14, up from 10. But only 200% more area of effect if consuming a corpse. This results in a radius of 42, up from 40 when consuming a corpse, so it is still higher. Spark now deals more base damage and has reduced growth. This results in dealing approximately 40% more damage at gem level 1, 10% more damage at gem level 20, and less beyond that. It deals less damage than it did before at gem level 40, but higher or the same at all other levels. Okay, so if you're not pushing the Spark gem level to 40, you're still doing more damage than it used to. Okay, maybe it's time to go back to Spark. Barrage now deals 47% of base attack damage at gem level 1, up from 40, and 54% of base attack damage at gem level 20, up from 46, so that's decent. This is approximately 17% more damage at gem level 1 and 15% more damage at gem level 20. Stormburst radius has now been increased with levels, resulting in +4 to base radius, all right, up from +2. Soul Run's base damage has been increased and growth has been slightly reduced, resulting in it dealing 20% more damage at gem level 1 and 10% more damage at gem level 20. Stormcall's growth has been increased, resulting in it dealing approximately 25% more damage. Lightning Tendrils Strong Pulses now deal 100% more damage with hits and ailments, up from 50. Lightning Arrow no longer has any increases to shock effect. As a result, it now has a higher value of shock as though dealing X more damage, as the gem levels, dealing 290% at gem level 20. Lightning Arrow also now deals 130% of base attack damage at gem level 1, up to 154% of base attack damage at gem level 20, up from 134%. That's 20%. This is approximately an 18% damage increase at gem level 1 and 14% at gem level 20. Rolling Magma damage growth per level has been increased, now deals 20% more damage at gem level 20. The amount of cold damage dealt per frenzy charge on discharge has been raised to match fire damage per endurance charge. This is an increase of approximately 22% more cold damage dealt. The minimum amount of lightning damage dealt per power charge has been slightly increased and the maximum slightly reduced. This results in the same average damage as the other two elements, but deals approximately 5% less overall lightning damage per power charge. So we get more cold damage, but less lightning damage. Split Arrow now has an attack speed of 110, up from 100%. And Flame Blast now deals 130% more spell damage from each stage, up from 110. Ooh, who's going to play Pizza Sticks? Do you guys remember playing Flame Blast Totems? Do you guys remember that? Hey, 2018 called. Do you guys remember that? Vol Flame Blast now deals 140% more spell damage for each stage, up from 120%. There are plenty of other smaller changes to be found in the patch notes, most of which are self-explanatory. That wraps up this balanced manifesto. As you can imagine, there are many significant changes to the feel of the game as a result of the mechanical changes that affect all players, so we will be keeping a very close eye on feedback sincerely posted by the community team of Grinding Gear Games. There you go. There's the balanced manifesto. Holy moly, we made it through the whole thing. My summary thoughts are, I'm always confused, but I'm always interested, and I'm always glad that Grinding Gear Games communicates with us in such a thorough and meaningful way, as to include patch notes, as to include hype trailers, as to include balanced manifestos, as to explain themselves on Reddit and on the forums and through live streams and through Q&A. There is no better gaming company out there communicating with players right now than Grinding Gear Games. There's no better game to play, in my opinion, than Path of Exile. That being said, there's always something that makes me scratch my head, like, hey, we want the game to be more challenging, but we're also making some things more powerful. We want you guys to experience more monster animations, but we're removing even more defensive layering options. You know, there's always some things that make me scratch my head, but I always have fun in every single Path of Exile league that I'm always privileged and allowed to play, and privileged to have the hobby time to be able to play. So thanks so much for joining us today. I look forward to reading and interacting with all of your thoughts and comments down below as time allows. And hopefully later on today, we will be back with, well, depending on what time zone you're in, hopefully later today or tomorrow, we'll be back with a patch notes reading where we do some breakdowns. Maybe we'll break out paint for that. You can let me know down below in the comments if you want me to break out paint. But thanks so much for joining us today. And I hope that the upcoming 3.15 Expedition League is the league, a Mirror of Calandra, drops for you. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.